This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
Welcome back to Big Stories. I'm your host, Cleon Wall. Let's not waste any time and dive in.
The Big Stories' 5 biggest storylines. Number 5.
The battered Bearcats. We're wrapping up more college football seasons here on the Big Stories Podcast. Let's start with Cincinnati. They were a nice surprise. I didn't expect them to play so well in the middle of the season. They won 7 straight games, and then the wheels came off, losing their last 5, including a bowl loss to Navy. They also lost starting quarterback Brendan Sorsby to Texas Tech. So I asked Charlie Walter of the Chatterbox Bears podcast how he will look back on this season.
Groundhog's Day. Unfortunately, it's been that way for football and basketball. Not necessarily close losses in football, but it's the same thing, and that is November. It's death, it's taxes, and it's Scott Satterfield losing games in November. I don't know if he's won a game. I think he's won one. I think he took down Houston his first year in November. I think 1-13 is the overall record right now in November. So this has happened every year. You know, they've gotten off to pretty good starts. We were talking college football playoffs in Brendan Sorsby's sophomore year, 1 year ago. And then they go into Colorado. They lose to Coach Prime. They lose to Texas Tech. They lose to Iowa State. And cue the insanity music because it happened again this season. So really what he needs to do is finish a season. This program needs to finish a season because it's very rare that you go from 7-1, college football playoff talk, college game day, and then you finish the season 7-6 with a loss in the Liberty Bowl. Your quarterback is the number 1 player on the market, a Heisman hopeful for next season, and you were only able to win 7 games with them. That's kind of the talk right now, is if Scott Satterfield wasn't able to beat Arizona at home last year and win some of these. I mean, BYU was a tough game, but wasn't able to take down BYU when I thought the Cougars gave the Cats a chance to win that game with some of the plays that were made, and UC couldn't finish it out. It's kind of just like the thought of, and Louisville fans had said it all along, like Scott Satterfield can win you 7 or 8 games. He's not a bad coach by any means, but he gives you a ceiling. And we're wondering as Bearcats fans, have we reached that ceiling, which is we're not bad. Maybe we're going to be a consistent bowl team, but that's not really a position you want to be for a program that, made 2 BCS bowl games under Brian Kelly and then a college football playoff under Luke Fickell. You want to have that internal thought of like, we can compete for Big 12 championships. But if it didn't happen with Brendan Sorsby, why do we think it's going to happen with our next quarterback, J.C. French?
Is there anything that's giving you hope for next season? You kind of laid out this, and I know there's always hope. Spring comes around and people are just like, hey, yeah, our team's going to be good next year, or even when you get closer to fall. And it might be hard looking for hope right now, but is there something that's giving you hope for next year for this Bearcats football team?
I think the hope is Scott Satterfield's been able to kind of find the diamonds in the rough. Linebacker last year, Jake Golday, came from Central Arkansas, and I think he's a Sunday guy. Brendan Sorsby was somewhat of a diamond in the rough when we, pulled him from Indiana, and he was backing up the starting quarterback at Indiana at the time, pre-Kirk Cincinnati. So you look at that aspect of it, and you say, all right, Satterfield's been able to get it done in the portal. We're not talking high school recruits anymore because that's just not the way that UC or really any team's building their program, but definitely not UC. We're a portal school at this point, and it flips over entirely every offseason. So the question is, what have we done in the portal? And some of the names that have come in are from these low-level schools. I'm talking schools you've never heard of, that it's just like, but they put up good numbers, and until you see them play, you never know. There's plenty of Hall of Famers that went to schools that you're kind of like, he went where? Mm-hmm. So you don't know. That's the positivity of it. But we've now seen it for 3 years that he hasn't been able to win in November. So results matter at a certain point. And I think most UC fans are saying, prove us wrong.
We will hear more from Charlie a bit later in the podcast.
Number 4.
What a wild conference season for the Arizona Wildcats. U of A's Big 12 conference season was almost the opposite to Cincinnati in football. The Cats lost 3 of their first 4 conference games. Then they rattled off 5 straight wins, including a win over Arizona State. The good vibes were probably tempered a bit by losing to SMU in the Holiday Bowl. Still, this team won 9 games and were ranked at the end of the regular season. So I wanted to ask Damon Fairall from the PHNX Wildcats podcast how he and the Wildcats faithful handled the relative success at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it was a successful season when it's all said and done. We'll look back on this season, no doubt, and think to ourselves, that was a really fun run in 2025 in particular. But I will say that the one thing that is, that bowl loss has left a bad taste in the mouth of Arizona fans, no doubt about it, especially when you consider Arizona gets down 24-0 in that game and unfortunately ends up losing by 5 points, I believe, 24-19. And in that game, you go for 2 twice, you don't get it, and you miss a field goal attempt. Or you could have gone for a field goal attempt inside of your own 10-yard line. That's 5 points right there. I know Arizona fans, most would probably say this was maybe the worst game of the season, other than that Iowa State game that Arizona played all year long. And a big portion of that was because the 3 best defensive players on the roster opted out of the game. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, I think. And, it's modern college football. You expect opt-outs in 2025, 2026, but I will say that these opt-outs were a little bit different in the eyes of Arizona fans because these were 3 players that not only stuck it out and rebuilt the program once, but did so twice at Arizona. These are guys who entered the transfer portal, decided to come back to U of A because they had unfinished business, and then kind of at the end of their tenure decided that they didn't have to play in that bowl game. And I think that was the part for Arizona fans that was just weird because it's like, this is one of the bigger bowl games in Arizona football history. We are not, we're not blind as to what our football program is, right? Like, we've been in a Fiesta Bowl. We've been in 2 Fiesta Bowls before. That's the biggest bowl game Arizona's ever played in football. And after that, the Holiday Bowl and the Alamo Bowl are right there, tied, I would say. And you have the opportunity to go out there and be one of the 5 Arizona teams that's ever won double-digit games, be an Arizona team that wins the Holiday Bowl for the 2nd time in program history, and you have your 3 best players on defense sitting out, the 3 guys that made this passing defense a top 10 passing defense in the country. And SMU goes out there, they throw for 200 yards in the first half of the game, seemingly against a defense that just wasn't of the caliber of a team that could beat a Kevin Jennings passing attack. SMU was in the playoff. They kept their quarterback. They have a pretty good team. I think that this is relative success. I think we'll look back on it in 5 years and say, man, that was a fun season. But it's hard to not feel like, wow, what could have been if those guys suited up in that game, because I have no doubt in my mind Arizona wins that game if Traden Stukes, Genesis Smith, and Dalton Johnson suit up.
Noah Fifita announced he is returning for another season, so that's good news for the Wildcats and hopefully gives the team and the fans some hope. What needs to be done to keep the Cats going in the right direction?
I think the offense, I think most Arizona fans feel pretty comfortable with, especially with your quarterback coming back. A lot of continuity on the coaching staff, no coaching changes outside of running backs coach Alonzo Carter, who is going to be the head coach at Sacramento State next season. And I know Arizona fans are pumped for him in that endeavor, but they just go ahead and they promote the assistant running backs coach to be the running backs coach. So very continuous throughout the coaching staff. And I think that, you expect the offense to be pretty similar with Noah Fifita in his last season of eligibility, with a pretty set-in-stone receiving core, and you've brought in some transfers at receiver already. Running back shouldn't be an issue with a lot of guys returning at that position. For me, it's all going to come down to how you replace those defensive backs, because those guys are all NFL draft hopefuls. I know that they all have like varying degrees of of where they're projected to go in the draft. Genesis Smith, sometimes you can see him in like the third round as high as. Other guy, Dalton Johnson, a little bit more undrafted. Traden Stukes probably more in that fifth round range. So we'll see where those guys end up. But those were three phenomenal players that carried loads of experience. I think the number was over 6,700 snaps at Arizona between those three players. So you're losing a lot in that DB room. I think Arizona has to find ways to supplement that production next season if they want to continue to have a similar season and continue kind of rising as a football program rather than going back to what you had in 2024. So yeah, I think that's going to be what's important. And Arizona has brought in some DBs in this cycle. It remains to be seen really what level they're at. I would expect a step back in that department, but how big of a step back is it going to be, I think, is going to determine what Arizona's record next year is.
Damon will also be back a bit later in the podcast.
Number 3.
The Big 12 basketball's bottom dwellers. Okay, that's not fair because we're still early in the season and things can change fairly quickly, but there are some surprises. On the other hand, are they really surprises? I'm not sure they're really surprises, as I'm thinking with nostalgia, or at least looking on these teams with nostalgia, and maybe not who these teams actually are. I'm not used to seeing Baylor at the bottom of the Big 12. It's no shame to lose to ranked teams in Iowa State and Houston, but losing to them at home is a bit of a head-scratcher to me. This team won a national championship in 2021, but this isn't 2021, and this team has struggled against every tough team they played. Coach Scott Drew really is concerned with, well, a lot of things. Toughness, scoring, defense. Baylor may stay at the bottom of the conference standings if they don't get things turned around. I'm also not used to seeing Cincinnati struggle so much because I'm used to the tough Bob Huggins or Mick Cronin teams. But according to Charlie Walter of the Chatterbox Bearcats podcast, these aren't those teams. Charlie, it feels like heartbreaker after heartbreaker to start the conference season for the Bearcats. Cincinnati lost their first 3 games, all by single digits. If they get one win, do you think things kind of turn around for this team?
It's hard to say. I do think the talent's there, which is nice knowing that there's so much season left and so many opportunities for quad 1 wins. At the same time, this is going on year 5. That's one of the curses and blessings of hosting Chatterbox Bearcats week in and week out is we go live as soon as the horn sounds. So we have opportunities to vent when it's on your mind, when it's raw. And it's been the same thing over and over and over again for 5 years. They've been close. They've had talent. They've taken good teams down to the wire, and they just can't win. I mean, BYU has been 2 of Wes Miller's biggest wins thus far. And both of those wins were kind of games where they controlled throughout and dominated a little bit. And, pretty much all his wins have come that way. But when it comes down to being tight, they just have not been able to finish games. This isn't this year. This is dating back to year 1. Still to this day, his biggest win was year 1 against Illinois when they beat DeSumo and some of those guys, and they beat him by like 20. That's kind of been the formula for Wes Miller winning games is go up big, stay up big, because when it gets tight, I believe the record is 3-51 now when they're trailing below 4 minutes. It's been extremely rough.
What is this team missing then? What is? I mean, that might be a loaded question because of the way you answered the previous question. But what's this team missing right now that they just need to kind of consistently win? And I know that's going to be tough just because you're in the Big 12 conference.
A go-to scorer. All the best Cincinnati teams throughout my lifetime, whether it was Steve Logan and the Bob Huggins days, or whether it was Sean Kilpatrick or Jaron Cumberland and the Mick Cronin days, you've always had a player that you can put the ball in their hands in the final 4 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever, and ask them to make a play. And a perfect encapsulation of the Wes Miller experience was in their last contest against UCF. You have a chance to pick up a top 25 road win, and there's 11 seconds left. Mustafa Cham had been the best player on the floor, but you're not going to necessarily dial up a play, in transition or, full court to get the ball down low to Cham for a baby hook to win the game or something. So you got to rely on one of your guards to make a play. And it ends up being Jizzle James driving into traffic, kicks it out to Jalen Celestine, who comes off the bench typically. And that's who's taking the final shot from 25 feet for the game winner. When you're down 1, it's a 3. And that's kind of the perfect encapsulation. It's like, who do you get the ball to in that situation? I think the plan was give it to Jizzle or Day-Day and have him make an isolation play and a step-back jumper. But Wes has never had that guy. I mean, Landers Nolly, who transferred from Penny Hardaway in Memphis in Wes's second year, was the closest thing we had to a go-to guy. And that was probably the closest thing we had to a tournament team. And since then, it feels like we always have the complementary pieces. We have some dudes. We just have not been able to get it done. And it's been extremely frustrating because it does feel like we are so close.
You mentioned guard Jizzle James. He was not with the team to start the season. Now he's back and in the starting lineup. How has he meshed with his teammates since returning?
I think he's done a good job. You don't play basketball and you focus on personal things in the offseason. It's going to take a minute to kind of get your sea legs under you. I thought his freshman year was probably his most impressive year in terms of him hitting the mid-range shot. That's his game. It's getting to a spot, that little turnaround jumper that he has, crossover, get to the 12-footer. The 3-ball hasn't necessarily been there yet in his career, but he's a competitor. He plays hard. And I think that he's come back pretty issue-free, which is the worry when someone gets kicked off the team for personal reasons, is that, they're going to come back and be a distraction. But I think he's been a true professional.
Hey, last thing, Charlie, if people want to listen to the Chatterbox Bearcats podcast, tell us more about it. Where can they find it?
It's very simple. It's YouTube, wherever you get your audio podcasts. We go live on YouTube pretty much as soon as the horn sounds. If it's a devastating, crippling loss, there is a chance that we take about 30 minutes to cool off. But it's a call-in show. We take voicemails. Everyone can call in. We have former players on from time to time to give us their thoughts on the state of the program. And it's, for the fans, by fans. I used to work at CBS and worked in the San Francisco market, cover the Warriors currently, but Cincinnati's my bread and butter. That's my team. I'm not even an alumnus, which is the crazy part. Only one of the 4 hosts is an alumnus. We all went to Ohio U, except one went to UC, but we grew up loving the Bearcats. Like, we grew up under, Bob Huggins' tutelage, and we're watching Kenyon Martin, and we truly believe that, especially basketball, that this program deserves better, and we make our voices known, no doubt about it. We have a lot of passion, and sometimes maybe a little too much passion. Get carried away from time to time, but that's fandom, right?
Yep. Charlie, thanks a lot. I'm not surprised that Utah is struggling right now. I mean, they've got a new coach. They've got new players. But they gave BYU a hard time. Guard Terrence Brown could give a lot of conference teams some heartache this season. I look forward to seeing if they can gain any momentum after their close loss to the Cougars. I also bring up Utah because I remember when Rick Majerus had really good teams. By the way, he's their old basketball coach. He had really good teams year in and year out at Utah. But after Rick left, this team has had a hard time putting together sustained success. Now, one of Rick's players is back to coach this team. His name's Alex Jensen. He's had success in the NBA and G League. Let's see if he can find success and at least sustain that success like his former coach.
Number 2.
The Big Middle. And of course, we're still talking Big 12 Conference basketball. Again, it's too early to say these teams will stay right in the middle of the conference, but we've got some interesting teams in here. Probably the biggest surprise is the Kansas Jayhawks. They are a blue blood that gets consideration every year of being at the top of the conference and in the top 25. Hence, that's why I'm surprised where they're kind of just like a middle-of-the-pack team. They also have one of the best freshmen in the nation in Darren Peterson, who could be the number 1 overall pick in the next NBA draft. The good thing going for Peterson is that he has played in their last 3 conference games. I say that's good because he's missed a lot of games this season, only playing in 4 non-conference games due to hamstring and quad issues. The bad thing is the team has been in a dogfight in every one of those conference games leading up to this week. Like Cincinnati and Baylor, I always figure that Kansas will be really good. Maybe it's just not their year, or maybe this is a trend after going 21-13 last season. Colorado and UCF are also in the Big Middle. I think that's encouraging for both of these teams. The Knights have already beaten KU and Cincinnati at home, but then lost to Oklahoma State on the road. I think every team is going to love hating playing in Orlando. I think you know why they love playing there. The hate part will be how tough it will be to play in Orlando. I think they're a team that's probably going to be in the middle of the pack the rest of the season. Then you have Colorado. Texas Tech barely beat the Buffaloes, but Colorado did start 2-1 to start this conference season. That's not bad. This team only won 3 conference games last season. They're probably another team that sticks about right in the middle, and that's really not that bad for CU.
Number 1.
Who's number 1? Right now, it's Arizona. That's pretty obvious, but we'll get to them in a second. Number 5 in the conference is probably Texas Tech, but I won't be surprised if they sneak higher in the coming weeks. JT Toppin is one of the better forwards in the nation, averaging 21 points and 11 rebounds a game, while Christian Anderson, he's a guard, is averaging around 19 points a game. The Red Raiders have already lost to Houston, but will play them once more. They will take on Arizona and Iowa State only once, but will face BYU twice, including at home this Saturday. At number 4, let's put BYU. They have the other big-time freshman who could be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, and that's A.J. Debonsa. Debonsa, Richie Saunders, and A.J. Wright are a fun trio with others playing nice complementary roles on this team, but I would be concerned with the Cougars' defense. Utah's Terrence Brown seemed to be able to drive past every Cougar they put on him. I think their defense is good. I just wonder if it can be great. They've got plenty of games to prove it. I would put Houston at number 3, and that's scary since their defense is still so good, and they just went to the national championship last season. They also have a dynamic freshman in Kingston Flemings. He's the team's second leading scorer and is dishing out 5 assists a game. I'm only putting them at number 3 because I can't dethrone the top 2 teams, at least not yet. Number 2, Iowa State. And they're number 2 in the nation right now since Michigan lost. If you want to find out more about their team, go listen to last week's podcast as we talked with Believe in Iowa State podcaster Tyler Carter. He gave some good insight on the Cyclones. The lucky and unlucky part for Iowa State right now is their schedule. They face Houston, BYU, Texas Tech, and Arizona only once this season, and their first game against any of those teams is not until February 16th, and that's against Houston. But that means they will face the rest of those 3 teams, those other big 5 teams, I guess you could say right now. They'll face 3 of them in the last 5 games of the season. They will face Kansas twice before meeting any of those teams. And as we told you, Arizona is number 1. They are number 1 in the nation and in the conference. They received 60 first-place votes in the AP poll to Iowa State's lone first-place vote. It's funnier in the coaches poll because Michigan also got a first-place vote, even though they lost over the weekend. Anyway, back to Arizona and PHNX Wildcats podcast host Damon Fairall. Arizona remains the number 1 team in the nation. I was trying to come up with a great, quippy name for them, but all I thought of was Thanos because it seems right now like they're inevitable. They have hammered so many teams this season.
Yeah.
For those who have not watched the Wildcats this year, why have they been so dominant?
I think that the Thanos comparison there is actually pretty apt because you're right. Like, Arizona goes out there and you know exactly how they're going to attack you every single game. Arizona has the mentality of, we're bigger than you, we're faster than you, we're stronger than you, we're going to be more physical than you. And I genuinely think in terms of, size, athleticism, and just toughness in general, that this is the number 1 team in the country in the combination of those regards. And I think that's why we see Arizona at number 1 right now, because they out-rebound every opponent they play. Florida, I believe, was closest this year. I think they only got out-rebounded by 3 or 4. That was night 1. UConn got out-rebounded by 20. Arizona is just dominating the glass. If you look at the metrics on KenPom, top 10 in both offensive and defensive rebounding percentage, and it shows when you watch the team. Tobe Awaka is quite possibly the greatest college basketball rebounder we've ever seen. He doesn't necessarily have the other facets of his game that make him unstoppable, but he is so damn good at rebounding. It is so special to watch. He's 100th percentile right now, according to Evan Maya, on both offensive and defensive rebounding, meaning he is the number one rebounder in the country in both offensive and defensive rebounding. And he doesn't even start. The starter is Mo Krivas, who is 7'2" and has shown worlds of development this season, and has put up a lot of double-digit rebounding efforts himself. I just think that that's really what the crux of this team is that they out-rebound you, they out-physical you. They're great at defense. They're really good in transition. They're not the best perimeter shooting team in the world. That's probably like maybe their one thing that holds them back a little bit is that they don't put up a lot of attempts. They're efficient when they shoot them, but they're just not really interested in shooting a ton of three-pointers. They want to just pound the paint. They want to throw it into their big man. They want to throw it into Koa Pete and let him just attack the basket because more often than not, he's either going to score or you're fouling him. And Arizona shoots a ton of free throws because they shoot so much in the paint. I think that the inevitability of this team with the Thanos comparison is very apt, like I said, because it's just they want to attack you in that same way every game. You know what's coming, but you still can't beat it because they're just too tall, too big, too physical.
This team was ranked 13th in the preseason, so it's not like everyone out there was thinking, yeah, they're not that good this season. I think people knew they were going to be good this season, but to be number one and to be hammering teams by so much, I want to know from your point of view, is it kind of a surprise to see that they're playing so well so far this season?
Honestly, and I think a lot of people would say this going into seasons because, we all are fans of our teams and, we expect our teams to be better than maybe what the consensus is. But I always felt that this team was closer to top 5 than top 15, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think as we got closer to the season, there was this weird, Koa Pete is actually not that good kind of narrative that was going around. And I would watch this guy play and I'd go, I'm sorry, I don't know who's stopping him at the college level. He's 6'8". He can handle the basketball. He can pass. He's got great touch around the rim. He's not a very good shooter, obviously. That's his biggest downside as a basketball player. But that athleticism just feels like it's so unstoppable in a college setting, right? Like a high-flying 4 who can just dunk on anybody, can create off his own dribble. How is that not going to work out? And it felt like Koa Pete, probably because he was hurt in the McDonald's All-American game showcase and had to sit out because being the guy that Koa Pete is, he broke his hand in his high school basketball season as a senior. He had won 3 straight state titles going into his senior year. And he said, I'm going to have surgery after the season is over because I'm going to go win this state title, my last one ever, with a broken hand. And he became the first Arizona high school basketball player to win 4 straight state championships and did so with a broken hand, being the MVP of his team. And then after that, he said, okay, I got to take some time to rest, heal up my hand. And that's why he didn't play in that McDonald's All-American showcase. And I think that that's maybe why people were like, let's temper expectations on Koa Pete, because they didn't see it against the AJ DeBanstas of the world and the Darren Petersons and, him going toe to toe with those guys when he absolutely can. So that's where, I think that maybe people got it a bit wrong. And yeah, we're seeing this Arizona team, like Tommy Lloyd has just built a squad that is just, he just wants to out physical you in every facet. And Koa Pete is the perfect player to do that, as your number one scoring option. Braden Burries had a rough start to the year, a 5-star in his own right, top 10 recruit. Rough start to the year, figured it out completely. He's now averaging 18 points per game, ever since the first 6 games of the season. Great efficiency, scoring from every single spot on the floor. I think that this team is just it's led by its freshmen, it's led by its rebounding efforts from its big men. But I always felt like this team was a little closer to being in that upper echelon with just you look at the depth on this roster and how they want to play basketball than being the number 13 team in the country.
I think it's also really cool that this team, every one of their starters, you talked about 2 of them in Braden Burries and also in Koa Pete, all 5 of these guys in the starting lineup, they're averaging double digits. And I mean, maybe you could describe these guys. I mean, you kind of talked already about 2 of them, but maybe you can talk about the other 3 and why these guys in the starting lineup seem to be fitting so well together and how it seems like, I don't know, in my opinion, it's like you've got several guys that could be the go-to guy on this team.
No doubt about it. I mean, like you said, you look at the scoring breakdown. You have Koa Pete, Braden Burries, Jaden Bradley all averaging over 13, but less than 15. And I think that's by design, is they don't want to be a team that is one-dimensionally set on, we need this guy to go off and score 25 on any night, or else we're kind of screwed. And I think that's where, this team is probably, from a rotation standpoint and like upper echelon players, the deepest team in the country. They go 8 deep, and that 8th man is a top 50 recruit in the country from last season. And he plays, Dwayne Aristo is that guy. He only plays 16 minutes a game. And he's a great defender. He's 6'8". He shoots, what is he shooting right now from 3? Something ridiculous, 48.8% from 3, and he plays 16 minutes a game, and he's a top 50 recruit. Like, that shows the depth right there. You look at this team, Koa Pete, Braden Burries, already spoke about them. I think Jaden Bradley is probably the most underrated player in the country. He might be the best player on this team. He makes every shot, it feels like, in the clutch, whenever he gets that opportunity. Last game against Kansas State, it was against TCU, sorry. He had 0 points at halftime, and he finished with 17 points in the game, because once it came to crunch time, it's Jaden Bradley time. And he is such a good player. He's such a two-way player. He's so good on the defensive side of the ball, averaging about 2 steals a game. Then you have the big men in Mo Krivas and Tobe Awaka, who are pretty much the perfect 20-20 split when it comes to minutes share that they get. Like, they are, I think it's unfair to call Tobe Awaka not a starter, because him and Mo Krivas have the same role. One guy just does the jump ball, and one guy doesn't. And so, you essentially have 6 starters in that regard. And then you have Anthony Del Orso, who is, you noted, is averaging double digits, 10.2 points per game. He started last season for Arizona. Now he comes off the bench. And he is one of the best shooters in the country, and is shooting from 3, actually pretty low on the percentage from 3 at this point right now, but he does shoot a pretty high volume. He's only at 32%. And then the last starter on the team is Ivan Karchenkov, who was the wild card of this team, full stop. He came in from Bayern Munich, played 2 minutes per game there last season. He is the 5th starter. He earned that starting role at the small forward spot. He's averaging 8.8 points per game, but that's not his role. He's not the guy who's supposed to be taking on the offense. He is the defensive stopper on this team. They treat him as the catalyst of the defense. Braden Burries said that we go with him on defense, and he's an absolute demon in the passing lanes. Unbelievable at garnering steals and forcing turnovers. And he is so athletic. Like, that is really the thing that pops off the screen when you watch Ivan Karchenkov. He's 6'7", 220 pounds as a freshman at Arizona. Came in just looking like a professional basketball player the moment that he stepped on the McKale Center court. And you watch it, like, the way he glides to the rim on offense, he doesn't always have the finishes, but he has the moves. He has the bag, that's for sure. He's a decent 3-point shooter, which is kind of what more of his role is, but really he's the defensive stopper on this team. No one really knew what we were getting in Ivan Karchenkov going into the season, and when we saw him in that starting lineup on night 1, Tommy Lloyd trusting him that much, I think it was pretty clear that we got a legit basketball player in Tucson here. And I think that, as I said, he's the real wild card of this team.
Well, I'm sure the fans are really excited at the McKale Center to watch this Wildcats team play night in and night out, at least when they're at home. And it's going to be tough for those teams that are going to be playing against them when I'm sure teams like BYU, since I'm associated with BYU, they're going to be really excited to welcome Arizona in just to see what kind of a team they are, because it's a measuring stick. So I think it's going to be exciting. Hey, Damon, thanks a lot. You've given us some great stuff today. If people want to listen to the PHNX Wildcats podcast, tell us about what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, we're just, kind of breaking down some transfer portal additions for Arizona football. And then, of course, we're Arizona basketball. So we got to talk about the number 1 team in the country pretty much every single day. We do so on our PHNX Sports YouTube channel. You can follow me at Damon Dog. That's DAWG on the end of it. I always love going back and forth with BYU fans, Cleon, because even though, like, sometimes I'll throw some stuff out there that the Cougar Nation isn't a big fan of, I always find BYU fans to be extremely respectful. I love the back and forth. I tweeted at one point during the football season that when you guys really got into that stretch of really tough games after the Arizona game that I was expecting 1 win or 2 wins in the next 5. And BYU fans really let me have it after I believe it was only 1 loss in that stretch. So, I think I love the back and forth with BYU fans, and I'm always very active on social media. So, give me a follow.
The Big Stories, Big Man on Campus.
Let's give it to the 4 fantastic freshmen, and we've talked about all 4 of them. Darren Peterson scored 32 points in the Jayhawks' victory over TCU. Kingston Fleming scored 23 points and dished out 5 assists in Houston's victory over Texas Tech. Arizona's Koa Pete had 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists in the Wildcats' victory at TCU. And BYU's AJ DeBonsa scored 23 points and had 5 assists in the Cougars' victory over Arizona State. Coming up on Thursday's episode of Big Stories, we feature a former Cincinnati Bearcat football player who helped to save his uncle's life. So make sure you download that episode coming up this Thursday. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of our great stories. Thanks again to Damon Fairall and Charlie Walter for joining today's Big Stories podcast. Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.